Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Dear cadets of class 12, Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to all of you. How are you, my dear cadets? I hope you all are fine at your respective homes. I welcome you all to my online class today. Dear cadets, you know very well, due to Corona, you cannot attend your regular classes. So, this online class will be helpful to you for continuing your lesson. First of all, let me introduce myself. Yes, I am Muhammad Moinuddin Khan, Assistant Professor of Botany, Department of Biology, your teacher. At the beginning of today's class, you have to realize what is COVID-19, what is the symptom of COVID-19 and how to protect yourself against COVID-19. Gentlemen, let's see the video about COVID-19.
COVID-19 is an infectious disease caused by a new coronavirus introduced to humans for the first time. It is spread from person to person, mainly through the droplets produced when an infected person speaks, coughs, or sneezes. These droplets can land in the mouths or noses of people who are nearby. These droplets are too heavy to travel far in the air. They only travel approximately 1 meter and quickly settle on surfaces. This is the reason person-to-person spread is happening mainly between close contacts. The exact time that the virus can survive on surfaces is not yet known. So it is wise to clean surfaces regularly, particularly in the vicinity of people infected with COVID-19. Hands touch many surfaces, which can be contaminated with the virus. You should therefore avoid touching your eyes, nose, or mouth, since contaminated hands can transfer the virus from the surface to yourself. When coughing or sneezing, cover your mouth and nose with the bend of your elbow or use a disposable tissue. If a tissue is used, discard it immediately into a closed bin. The most effective way to prevent the spread of the new coronavirus is to clean your hands frequently with an alcohol-based hand rub or soap and water. This will eliminate the virus if it is on your hands. Stay healthy and prevent the spread of COVID-19.
Yes, my dear cadets, our today's topic is Photosynthesis, Chapter 9, Plant Physiology, Lesson 1 up 2. And subtopics is photosynthetic organ, photosynthetic pigments, photosynthesis mechanism, light phase and dark phase, C3 and C4 cycle, cyclic photophosphorylation, and non-cyclic photophosphorylation. Now, learning outcome. At the end of this class, you should be able to learn, explain the role of ATP as the main source of energy in a living cell. Explain the production of carbohydrates through the process of photosynthesis. Explain the role of chlorophyll and light in photosynthesis. Difference between C3 and C4 cycle. Difference between C4 and C3 plant. Difference between cyclic and non-cyclic photophosphorylation, and so many more. Now, some important keywords: photolysis, photosynthesis, physiology, hydrolysis, photosystem, pigment system, dark phase, light phase, C3 and C4 cycle, biological coin, pheophytin, electron chain, plastoquinone, cytochrome, plastocyanin, ferredoxin, and ATP. Now, my dear cadets, bioenergy is renewable energy produced by living organisms. The energy we get from making and breaking of chemical bonds in the molecules found in biological organisms is called bioenergy. Living organisms continuously collect energy from the environment, transform them from one into another, sometimes preserve them, and release them again in the environment. Now, do you know what is photosynthesis? Yes, my dear. In presence of sunlight, with the help of chlorophyll, carbon dioxide and water react with each other and produce carbohydrate food materials is called photosynthesis. On the other hand, the process by which green plants manufacture carbohydrate food materials with the help of carbon dioxide and water in presence of sunlight and release oxygen by as byproduct is known as photosynthesis. Now, the process of photosynthesis can be shown by the following chemical reaction. My dear cadets, look at this reaction. 6 molecules of carbon dioxide and 12 molecules of water in presence of light and chlorophyll produce 1 molecule of carbohydrate and 6 molecules of oxygen and 6 molecules of water. Photosynthesis is a biochemical process. The term photosynthesis first used by Bernays in 1898. It consists of 2 words. Photo means light and synthesis means production. So production of something in presence of sunlight by the green plants is called photosynthesis. Therefore, it is obvious photosynthesis occurs in daytime only. In this process, light energy is converted into chemical energy. In presence of sunlight, green plants manufacture glucose molecules with the help of carbon dioxide and water. At the end of reaction, oxygen is released as a byproduct. Now, my dear cadets, what is biological coin? It means why ATP is called biological coin and what is photolysis? Firstly, biological coin. ATP stores energy and supplies energy for other reactions when necessary. That's why ATP is called biological coin or energy coin. Now, photolysis. Water is split into electron, proton, and oxygen in the presence of magnesium and chlorine. This splitting of water by light is called photolysis. Look at this, my dear cadets, the reaction of photolysis. Now, my dear cadets, what is photosynthetic organ? Any living cell which contains chlorophyll can do photosynthesis, as the green leaves of the higher plants contains maximum chloroplast are known as main organ of photosynthesis. For the following reasons, the green leaves are treated as the organ of photosynthesis. Firstly, the large area of leaf surface able to absorb maximum sunlight and carbon dioxide gas. Second, large number of stomata present in the leaf can exchange gas easily. Due to presence of thin cell wall, carbon dioxide gas can be absorbed by spongy parenchyma cells easily. Reticulate and parallel venation of the leaf translocates the water easily to all the cell and phloem tissue distributed the prepared food to all the parts of the plants. Now, essential materials for photosynthesis. My dear cadets, the materials which are required for the process of photosynthesis are light, chlorophyll, water, and carbon dioxide. Firstly, light. Without light, photosynthesis is not possible. Sun is the source of light. Light is an electromagnetic wave. Light comes from the sun in the form of wave. There are 7 colors in the light spectrum. The range of their wavelength is 390 nanometer to 760 nanometer. 1 nanometer is equal to nanometer is equal to millimicron. 1 millimeter is equivalent to 1000 micron. 1 micron is equivalent to 1000 millimicron. Now, my dear cadets, they are known as visible ray. Only these visible rays take part in photosynthetic process. The unit of light energy is called photon. Beyond these visible rays, there are non-visible ultraviolet ray, X-ray, cosmic ray, beta ray, which have very short wavelength below 390 nanometer, and infrared ray, which has very long wavelength above 660 nanomicron. Among the visible rays, red and blue lights are absorbed maximum by the plants for photosynthesis. The rate of photosynthesis is maximum in red light. Now, chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is a green pigment present in chloroplast of the cell. They usually absorb photon of light. There are chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, xanthophyll, and keratin. There are two types of chlorophyll. Chlorophyll A, 673, which absorbs 673 nanomicron wavelength light. Chlorophyll A, and chlorophyll B is 683 nanomicron, which absorbs 683 nanomicron wavelength light. Except these three are P700, which absorbs 700 nanometer wavelength light, and P pigment system 680, which absorbs 680 nanomicron wavelength light. Chlorophyll A is yellow-green, chlorophyll B is blue-green, xanthophyll is yellow, and keratin is orange in color. The chemical formula of chlorophyll A is C55H72O5N4. Now, magnesium. Chlorophyll B, C55H70O6N4 magnesium. Keratin, C40H56O. Xanthophyll, C40H56O2. Oxygen, it means oxygen 2. C, it means carbon 40, hydrogen 56, and oxygen 2. Phycocyanin, carbon 34, hydrogen 44, oxygen 8, and nitrogen 4. Phycoerythrin, it's one kind of pigment, carbon 34, H46O8N4. Chlorophyll is soluble in organic solvent. Now, my dear cadets, different colors ray and their wavelength. Now, water. Water is another important raw materials of photosynthesis. Plant absorbs the capillary water from the soil by osmosis process. This water later on, I repeat, this water later on translocates through xylem tissue to the leaves and take part in photosynthesis. For the production of 1 molecule glucose, 12 molecules of water are needed. Now, carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is another important raw material of photosynthesis. Plant absorbs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. In the atmosphere, only 0.035% carbon dioxide is present. This carbon dioxide enters into the leaves through stomata and reaches spongy and pellucid parenchyma. In the photosynthesis process, for the production of 1 molecule glucose, 6 molecule carbon dioxide are required. Now, my dear cadets, photosystem. All the chlorophyll molecules are and related electron carriers together act as unit. This unit is known as photosystem. Photosystem situated on thylakoid membrane, and it may contain up to 400 chlorophyll molecules. There are two types of photosystem. One is photosystem 1, it means PS1, and another is photosystem 2, it means PS2. Now, photosystem 1, it means PS1. It consists of chlorophyll A, 683 nanomicron, keratin, xanthophyll, and P700, a special type of chlorophyll which absorbs 700 nanometer wavelength light. Number 2, photosystem 2, it means PS2. It consists of chlorophyll A, 673 nanomicron or nanomicrometer, chlorophyll B, P680, a special type of chlorophyll which absorbs 680 nanomicron or nanomicrometer wavelength light. This photosystem it means PS1 and PS2 are connected with electron transport system E to S. In each of the photosystem, there are three parts. One, light capturing part, second, reaction center, and thirdly, electron transport system. P700 and P680 act as a reaction center. All the chlorophylls and carotenoids absorb the light energy and then transfer this energy to the reaction center. Now, what is electron carriers present in the electron transport system? Phosphatin, an electron carrier, join with next carrier plastoquinone by electron chain. Second, plastoquinone PQ, cytochrome, cyto F, cyto B, 6, plastocyanin PC, pyridoxine FD, and NADP reactase. It means NADP, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate. Now, my dear cadets, mechanism of photosynthesis. In 1905, Blackman described the photosynthesis in two phases. One is light dependent phase or light phase or photochemical phase, and there is dark phase or light independent phase or electron chain phase. Firstly, light dependent phase or light phase. Formation of ATP and NADPH plus H or NADPH2. Light is very much essential in this phase. All the chemical reactions are done in presence of sunlight. That is why this phase is known as light dependent phase. The reaction takes place in thylakoid membrane. Chlorophyll pigments absorb light energy and become highly energized. These highly energized electrons of chlorophyll go through different electron carriers and release some energy. But utilizing this energy, ADP, it means adenosine diphosphate, unites with inorganic phosphate to form ATP. ATP means adenosine triphosphate. The formation of ATP from ADP by utilizing light energy is called photophosphorylation. Now, light dependent phase. Besides this, in this phase, oxygen is released and NADP, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate, is reduced into NADPH2, and when nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate reduced by breakdown of water. Water is oxidized and NADP is reduced by the hydrogen released from water. Now, ATP and NADPH2 are known as accelerated power. This power will be utilized to reduce carbon dioxide in the dark phase. In 1957, scientists Arnon and et al. Divided the photophosphorylation and electron transport system into two phases. One is cyclic photophosphorylation and another is non-cyclic photophosphorylation. Firstly, cyclic photophosphorylation. The process of photophosphorylation where chlorophyll molecules become energized by absorbing sunlight and releasing to electron which travels via different electron carriers. On the way, they produce one ATP and return back to the same chlorophyll molecule is called cyclic photophosphorylation. This is the diagram of cyclic photophosphorylation. In this process, photosystem 1 take part. The chlorophyll pigment absorb light of 683 nanomicron or micrometer wavelengths and become energized. This energy is transferred to reaction center P700. Later on, two electrons of high energy level generate from P700 move to pyridoxine. Then the electrons transfer to plastoquinone through cytochrome B6. then plasticine to cytochrome complex, cytochrome F. At this stage, some energy is released. By utilizing this energy, ATP is formed in combination with ADP and inorganic phosphate. At last, the electrons returns to P700 photosystem, pigment system, which is called pigment system 700, P700 through plastocyanin. Finally, one ATP is formed by this cycle, photophosphorylation. Now, my dear cadets, non-cyclic photophosphorylation. The process of photophosphorylation, where the high energized electron released from chlorophyll molecules travel via different electron carriers unit with NADP to form NADPH2, but the electron never return back to the same chlorophyll molecule is called non-cyclic photophosphorylation. In this photophosphorylation, both photosystem 1 and photosystem 2 are participate. Firstly, chlorophyll A 673 nanomicron or micrometer and chlorophyll B absorb light energy and become highly energized. This absorbed light energy is transported to the reaction center P680. The high energy electron released from the P680 are received by PQ, it means plastoquinone. Later on, it passes from PQ to cytochrome complex, it means cytochrome F. Here, these electrons release it, where whole energy and form one molecule of ATP from ADP and inorganic phosphate. Then the electrons transfer from cytochrome complex to PS1 via PC, it will plastocyanin. Plastocyanin supplies electron to P700 of PS1 because P700 has already released to electron to FD plus ferredoxin. Thereafter, this electron unite with NADP, it means nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate. By hydrolysis of water, NADP reduced to NADPH2. This is the diagrammatic figure of non-cyclic photophosphorylation. The electron which is lost in the photosystem 2 is filled up by the electron coming from the water. With the help of sunlight in presence of chlorine and manganese, water splits into two hydrogen ions, 2 electrons and half oxygen. The breakdown of water in presence of sunlight is called hydrolysis of water. Oxygen is released in the atmosphere, electron accepted in the field, in the chlorophyll. I repeat, electron accepted in the chlorophyll molecule of photosynthesis 2 and proton reduces NADP to NADPH2. So the oxygen which is released during photosynthesis comes from the water in the non-cyclic photophosphorylation, not from carbon dioxide. Now, my dear cadets, the difference between cyclic and non-cyclic photophosphorylation. Cyclic photophosphorylation, only PS1, it means pigment system 1, take part in the reaction. But non-cyclic photophosphorylation, PS1 and PS2, both the photosynthesis system take part in the reaction. Now, cyclic photophosphorylation, no oxygen is produced in cyclic photophosphorylation. Oxygen is produced in non-cyclic photophosphorylation. No reduction of NADP. NADP is reduced into NADPH plus or H2. Net products of cyclic photophosphorylation is 1 ATP, but non-cyclic photophosphorylation net product is ATP, NADPH2 and oxygen. In cyclic photophosphorylation, electron released from pigment system 700 carried by different carriers and again return to the P700 chlorophyll pigments. In non-cyclic photophosphorylation, the electrons released from the chlorophyll molecules does not come back to the same chlorophyll molecule. Measures dark phase or light independent phase. The phase of photosynthesis where light does not take part is called dark phase or light independent reaction. This phase takes place in stroma. The ATP and NADPH2 produced in light phase are utilized to reduce carbon dioxide into glucose molecules. During dark phase, NADPH2 is oxidized and carbon dioxide is reduced to carbohydrate by taking the hydrogen from NADPH2. There are three recognized ways of reduction of carbon dioxide molecules to form glucose. They are Calvin cycle, Haslach cycle, and CMP cycle. Glucose is called principal carbohydrates. Sucrose is called translocable carbohydrates. Starch is called storage, and cellulose is called structural carbohydrate. Starch is the visible product since it can be stained with iodine. Now I take its Calvin cycle or C3 cycle. In 1947, scientists Calvin, Benson, and Basham of California University of USA discovered the carbon reduction way using radioactive carbon 14. This is called Calvin cycle or Calvin-Basham cycle. In this cycle, the first product is 3 carbon compounds, 3-phosphoglyceric acid. That is why this cycle is also known as C3 cycle. The plants which follow this cycle is called C3 plants. Calvin cycle can be described into 2 phases. One is synthesis of carbohydrates and secondly regeneration of ribulose bisphosphate. Now what is synthesis of carbohydrate. Carbon dioxide enters into the leaves through stomata from the atmosphere and unites with 1,5-ribulose bisphosphate to form 6 carbon unstable material. It is called keto acid. At once, this 6 carbon keto acid breaks into 2 molecules of 3-phosphoglyceric acid, and this 3-phosphoglyceric acid is the first permanent compound of this process. This 3-phosphoglyceric acid now reacts with ATP in presence of enzyme acid kinase and form 1,3-bisphosphoglyceric acid. Now, 1,3-diphosphoglyceric acid, which is called bisphosphoglyceric acid, in presence of triose dehydrogenase enzyme and NADPH2 forms 2 molecules of 3-phosphoglyceraldehyde. Number 5. In presence of triose phosphates, isomerase enzyme 3-phosphoglyceraldehyde transformed into 3-dihydroxyacetone phosphate. It is done by an isomeric reaction, triose phosphates. Number 6, by the activity of aldolase enzyme, 1 molecule of 3-phosphoglyceraldehyde and 1 molecule of dihydroxyacetone phosphate unite together to form fructose 1,6-bisphosphate. Fructose 1,6-bisphosphate. Earlier it was called diphosphate. Number 7, in presence of phosphatase enzyme, fructose 1,6 bisphosphate convert into fructose 6-phosphate. Look at this reaction, my dear cadets. Fructose 1,6 bisphosphate in presence of phosphatase enzyme, it convert into fructose 6-phosphate. This fructose 6-phosphate is converted finally into glucose, then sugar and starch, so on. Now, my dear cadets, regeneration of Ru15 bisphosphate it means ribulose 1,5 bisphosphate. Erythrose 4 phosphate is produced from fructose 6 phosphates. By the activity of aldolase enzyme, erythrose 4 phosphates unite with 3 molecule of dihydroxyacetone phosphate forms 1,7 pseudoheptulose bisphosphate. In presence of enzyme phosphatase, pseudoheptulose 1,7 bisphosphate form 7 pseudoheptulose phosphate by releasing 1 phosphate. This is the Calvin cycle, my dear cadets. Another Calvin cycle. Number 4, by the activity of transcriptase enzyme, pseudoheptulose 7 phosphate unites with 3 phosphoglyceride forms ribose 5 phosphate and xylose 5 phosphate. Later on, xylose 5 phosphate converted into ribose 5 phosphate. Number 5, in presence of enzyme isomerase, ribose 5 phosphates converted into ribulose 5 phosphate. As like xylulose 5 phosphate converted into ribulose 5 phosphate by the action of epimerase. Number 6, at last in presence of phosphatase enzyme, I repeat, at last in presence of phosphatase enzyme and ATP, ribulose 5 phosphates produce ribulose bisphosphate.
In order for plants
Let's
to grow,
enjoy
they
the
need to
video
input
of
some
photosynthesis
carbon
process.
dioxide, water, and energy. The chemical process by which plants use these resources to manufacture glucose, the building blocks of plants, is called photosynthesis. In the process, oxygen gas is produced as a byproduct. The energy for photosynthesis originates in the sun and arrives at the earth as sunlight. This light has both a wave and a particle nature. The particles, or photons, are the smallest units of light. Photons oscillate along a path, which is measured as wavelengths. The light emitted from the sun contains photons in a wide spectrum of wavelengths, called the electromagnetic spectrum. Photosynthetic organisms use only a small portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, called visible light. Photosynthetic organisms contain pigments that facilitate the capture of wavelengths of light in the visible light range. The color of the pigment comes from the wavelengths of light reflected. Plants appear green because they reflect yellow and green wavelengths of light. Red and blue wavelengths of light are absorbed by these pigments and provide the energy that is used for photosynthesis. Within eukaryotic photosynthetic organisms, also known as photoautotrophs, the chemical reactions of photosynthesis occur within plant cells in specialized structures known as chloroplasts. Photosynthesis consists of 2 sets of reactions, the light-dependent reactions and the Calvin cycle. Within the chloroplast are small disc-like structures called thylakoids, which are surrounded by a fluid-filled space called the stroma. The reactions that synthesize glucose, the Calvin cycle, occur in the stroma. The light-dependent reactions occur in the thylakoid. It is here that conversion of light energy to chemical energy is initiated. In most photosynthetic organisms, Thylakoids contain pairs of photosystems called photosystem 1 and photosystem 2 that work in tandem to produce the energy that will later be used in the stroma to manufacture sugars. The photosystems of the thylakoid consist of a network of accessory pigment molecules and chlorophyll, the molecules that absorb the photons of light. Within the pigment molecules, the absorbed light energy excites electrons to a higher state. Photosystems will channel the excitation energy gathered by the pigment molecules to a reaction center chlorophyll molecule, which will then pass the electrons to a series of proteins located on the thylakoid membrane. Photons of light strike photosystems 1 and 2 simultaneously. We will examine what happens with the photons striking photosystem 2 first. The energized electrons are passed from the reaction center of photosystem 2 to an electron transport chain. The electrons lost by photosystem 2 are replaced by a process called photolysis, which involves the oxidation of a water molecule producing free electrons and oxygen gas. While this oxygen gas is a byproduct of photosynthesis, it is an important input to the cellular respiration pathways. As electrons pass through the electron transport chain, the energy from the electron is used to pump hydrogen ions from the stroma to the thylakoid, creating a concentration gradient. This gradient powers a protein called ATP synthase, which phosphorylates ADP to form ATP. The low-energy electrons leaving photosystem 2 are shuttled to photosystem 1. Within photosystem 1, low-energy electrons are re-energized and are passed through an electron transport chain where they are used to reduce the electron carrier NADP+ to NADPH. When the chloroplast is receiving a steady supply of photons, NADPH and ATP molecules are rapidly being provided to the metabolic pathways in the stroma. Therefore, the ATP and NADPH formed during the light-dependent reactions are used in the stroma to fuel the Calvin cycle reactions. The Calvin cycle consists of a series of reactions that reduce carbon dioxide to produce the carbohydrate glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. The cycle consists of 3 steps, the first of which is carbon fixation. In this step, carbon dioxide is attached to ribulose 1,5-bisphosphate, resulting in a 6-carbon molecule that splits into 2 3-carbon molecules. The second step is a sequence of reactions using electrons from NADPH and some of the ATP to reduce carbon dioxide. In the final step, ribulose 1,5-bisphosphate is regenerated. For every 3 turns of the cycle, 5 molecules of glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate are used to reform 3 molecules of ribulose 1,5-bisphosphate. The remaining glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate is then used to make glucose, fatty acids, or glycerol. It takes 2 molecules of glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate to make 1 molecule of glucose phosphate. Thus, the Calvin cycle has to run 6 times to produce 1 molecule of glucose. These molecules can remove their phosphate and add fructose to form sucrose, the molecule plants use to transport carbohydrates throughout their system. Glucose phosphate is also the starting molecule for the synthesis of starch and cellulose. Plants produce sugars to use as storage molecules and structural components for their own benefit. By utilizing the energy of the sun, along with inputs of water and carbon dioxide, plants act as glucose factories. Photosynthetic organisms are the primary producers of glucose on the planet. They also produce oxygen gas as a byproduct, and thus serve as the foundation of life, providing food and oxygen for the complex food webs on both land and in the oceans.
Dear cadets, it's time for homework. It's a great question. Plants needs to take carbon dioxide from the air for the process of preparing a food. So a harmful gas of the animals is utilized. Besides, plants release oxygen in the air. First question, what is photolysis? Second question, what do you mean by photophosphorylation? Third question, describe the process of plants where above gas is used. And last question is, what is the source of oxygen that is released by the above process? Give your own opinion. No more today, my dear cadets. Thank you for attending my online class. If you have any question and query on my class, you can clarify it having an online session with me at the period of your scheduled classes. Thank you for patient hearing and viewing. At last, stay on home because we are passing critical and crucial moment. Take healthy food, take necessary rest, take fresh drinking water, wash your both hands frequently by soap. Please take care of your parents. Please don't go outside here and there. And pray to Almighty Allah 5 times so that we all are overcome this crucial situation. May Almighty Allah bless us all. Thank you once again. Your next class is rest of the photosynthesis lesson 2 up to